Semiconductor stocks power a rally across Asia-Pacific markets on Thursday. Russia is considering a ban on precious metal exports in response to Western sanctions, and the IMF approves a $7 billion loan for Pakistan. We look at what this will mean for the country's economy. Hello, I'm Taiba Aiden with the latest business and finance news here on TRT World. Asia-Pacific markets rose on Thursday with semiconductor and related stocks leading gains. Japan's Nikkei 225 climbed more than 2.5%, while the broad-based topics was up around 2% as the Bank of Japan released minutes from its July meeting. Mainland China's CSI 300 extended gains for a seventh straight session, hitting its highest levels in nearly 2 months after Beijing rolled out a slate of economic stimulus measures this week. The Chinese government also announced it will offer a one-time cash allowance to those in extreme poverty on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the founding of New China. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index rose around 2.8%. South Korea's Kospi also jumped around 2.5%, powered by gains in chipmaker SK Hynix, which surged more than 8%, while the small-cap Kosdaq gained 2.3%. And overnight in the US, both the Dow Jones and S&P 500 retreated from their latest records. Let's get more on this now with Hani Abouagla in Dubai. He's senior market analyst at XTB MENA. Thanks for joining us, Hani. Firstly, can you tell us what's driving the surge in Asian markets on Thursday?
Thank you for having me today first. I think the surge started after the Fed cut the interest rate by 50 basis points. And also China, yesterday they moved a lot with almost $140 billion of another package, as we can say. I think that the big demand for the chips, especially in the market from the TSMC, from Samsung, from SK Hynix, and even Tokyo Electron, all these companies are leading the game in Asia Pacific. And I think because of the big jump also in the tech market in US, they are the main supplier for them. And another thing also, the big talk about shifting their supply chain away from Asia with the big tension of China and US and moving it to try to move it away to either Germany, to Japan, and to US, and also the latest talk to move it to UAE with a big jump of 100 billion project to move TSMC and Samsung to the region.
Right, very interesting. Now, how significant are China's recent economic stimulus measures, particularly the cash allowances announced on Thursday?
I think this one is a very good one because it's not the first one. We have seen also another package before, and it's just boosting the economy and boosting the stock market. They made almost 113 billion to boost the stock market and almost 140 billion to boost the whole economy. I think China, they are trying to go in a very slow steps to try to push their economy to reach the 5% growth, even though it's very hard because even JP Morgan and Nomura, they said clearly that they will only do 4.6%, not more than that. But I think it's a helpful package to the right path. And I think Xi Jinping made it clear that they want to improve the economy in a healthy way.
Let's have a look at the US now. We've seen the S&P and Dow Jones both slide from their record highs. What's behind that retreat?
I think it's a normal correction, especially after the US data that it released yesterday, and also there is a data today and also tomorrow and Friday, the PCE and the GDP. All these data are very important. Currently, the Fed made it clearly that they will be data-driven. If the data comes in their favor, they will cut another cut on November, and there is another cut on December. I think the market is pricing these cuts. In 2024, they said there is 2 cuts, and there is another 4 or 5 cuts in 2025. I think the market is pricing that, and I don't think the market is going to correct anytime soon because I think this is a very big cycle in a cut. They need to price that in. That's why we have seen the S&P 500 touching 5,700 and also the Dow Jones passing the 42,000 level, and I don't think they will stop anytime soon unless US says something differently or Jerome Powell says something different.
All right, Hani Abu Agla, Senior Market Analyst at XTV MENA, thank you very much for your analysis.
Thank you.
The International Monetary Fund has approved a new bailout package after Pakistan promised to undertake crucial policy reforms. The Executive Board of the IMF approved the unprecedented $7 billion loan. Cameron Youssef has more from Islamabad.
Pakistan will be hoping it has staved off economic collapse with a record $7 billion bailout from the International Monetary Fund. The Washington-based lender will disperse $7 billion over the next 37 months. It's the 25th bailout Pakistan has received since 1958.
The IMF program is necessary at this stage because of our external account position. Our foreign exchange reserves, although they are stable, but they're still at around 2 months of import cover. We are stable, but we would like to see a stronger foreign exchange reserve position. And until we do that, I think the IMF program allows us to get comfort on the external front.
Last week, the country's deputy finance minister told Parliament that Pakistan would require $100 billion to repay external loans in the next 4 years. It hopes the IMF bailout can take care of the external liabilities. But the new program carries tough conditions. These include ending subsidies and raising electricity and gas tariffs. In June, the IMF demanded the government imposed new taxes worth $6.7 billion.
Pakistan is facing challenges, but let's pray that this is our last IMF program. As the Prime Minister has said, we won't go back to the IMF after this program.
The new IMF program we have received will certainly increase difficulties for the nation. Obviously, when a country takes on loans, it has to pay interest, so the nation has to pay the price.
Pakistan's economic meltdown over the past few years has been compounded by political instability. This is the country's third straight IMF loan program. Pakistan has shown some economic recovery in recent months. The rate of inflation has slowed. It was at a record 38% in May last year, but was down to 9.6% in August. The Asian Development Bank, meanwhile, in its latest report says Pakistan's GDP growth is projected to have recovered modestly to 2.4% and should grow further by 2.8% in next financial year. The Manila-based lender says the country's full economic recovery hinges on the implementation of policy reforms. While the new IMF program will bring macroeconomic stability, its stringent conditions mean that growth will remain sluggish. Kamran Yusuf, TRT World, Islamabad.
For more, we're joined by Mariam Kamal, who's an assistant professor at the Centre for South Asian Studies at the University of the Punjab. Good to see you, Mariam. Now, how will this $7 billion IMF loan impact Pakistan's economic stability and long-term growth?
Thank you very much. Well, as per my analysis, that it won't affect the economy in the long term. In fact, it will basically maintain the status quo and will secure Pakistan from going into any economic default. Otherwise, this is the 24th time Pakistan is going through the IMF package bailout, and the previous 23 times we couldn't basically we just sustained the economy and prevented Pakistan from going into any kind of economic default. Otherwise, without any structural reforms or deep-rooted reforms, Pakistan won't be able to sustain its economy in the long term.
And how will the government's plans to increase taxes in line with IMF requirements affect businesses and public sentiment in Pakistan?
The taxes will be, according to IMF, it will be increased around 1.3 trillion, which is equal to 1% of the GDP. And it will definitely burden the salaried persons and the businessmen. And it will definitely increase the inflation. As per different sources, the inflation rate in Pakistan is currently 25% and will definitely increase by the increased taxes. And another aspect that in terms of taxes, that we need to increase the direct taxes, and but according to the government, non-direct taxes has been increased, and we need to include the retail, export, and agriculture sector in order to for a collective and better tax collection.
Now, Pakistan has an external debt exceeding $130 billion. How challenging will it be to meet repayment obligations over the next few years?
As I said, as per my analysis, that it is just maintaining the status quo. It won't affect Pakistan's long-term policy, economic policy, unless Pakistan goes into a structural reform, which includes cutting down and an effective tax collection, including the agriculture sector, a fair balance between the provincial and the federal level, because without their cohesive effort in order to curtail or basically maintain the economy, things won't be able to work in that terms. And lastly, managing the private sector and attracting the foreign investment as well. All these reforms are very much mandatory in terms of internal dynamics or economic dynamics of Pakistan to change the structural or to change the dynamics or bring some structural reform.
And what role have China and Saudi Arabia played in helping Pakistan secure this IMF deal? And what does it mean for future alliances?
We're extremely thankful to China and Saudi Arabia anyway, because whenever we needed them, they were beside us, beside Pakistan, and helped them in the tough times. But again, they have their own stakes as well in terms of regional politics. Like China is basically in support of Pakistan vis-a-vis India. Saudi Arabia is in support of Pakistan vis-a-vis Iran in the region. So they have their own stakes as well. So basically, despite of all the regional politics, still we are thankful because they timely have gave that guarantee to IMF for this bailout, and we succeeded on 25th September under the executive board and got this bailout package to sustain the economy of Pakistan.
All right, Mariam Kamal from the University of the Punjab. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now a quick look at some of the other top business stories from around the world. Meta has introduced a prototype for advanced augmented reality glasses, dubbed Orion, as the race to build the next computing platform heats up. While still in development, the glasses offer features like holographic displays, AI integration, and neural interfaces. Tech companies have long been trying to develop AR wearables, but they have so far failed to excite consumers. US private equity firm Blackstone has announced a $13.3 billion investment to create Europe's biggest AI data center in the UK. The energy-intensive data center will be constructed on a former electric vehicle battery site in Blyth after previous plans fell through. The British government says the investment will create 4,000 jobs, including 1,200 roles dedicated to the construction of the site. And big changes are underway at OpenAI. Chief Technology Officer Mira Murati, who played a key role in developing ChatGPT, is stepping down after 6.5 years. Two top research executives, Bob McGrew and Barrett Zoff, are joining her in leaving the organization. The decision comes at a crucial time as the company seeks a major restructuring for profit. And SpaceX is proposing a $15 billion investment in Vietnam related to its Starlink satellite service, according to Vietnam's government. The announcement follows a recent meeting in New York between Vietnamese President To Lam and SpaceX's Senior Vice President Tim Hughes. Lam urged SpaceX to collaborate closely with local stakeholders to ensure the efficient completion of pre-investment preparations. Russian President Vladimir Putin has asked his government to consider limits on the export of precious metals in retaliation to Western sanctions. Many commodities, including strategically sensitive raw materials, aren't subject to major restrictions and continue to be shipped to Western markets. Dasha Chernyshova has more from Moscow.
Almost 3 years after becoming the most sanctioned country in the world, Russia is now considering imposing sanctions of its own. Moscow says it may restrict the export of uranium, titanium and nickel, a move that would cause a global supply shortage and send prices rocketing. But it's something that could also backfire on Russia itself. But the very fact that there is a public debate on who would be impacted most is a clear sign that this has become a serious proposition.
The entire legal framework in this sector, relevant decrees of the government, decisions of the federal executive authorities already clearly distinguishes the countries of the global majority with which we are working on a mutually beneficial basis and unfriendly states.
Not only is Russia's Rosatom the world's leader in global uranium enrichment, nuclear fuel and technology, but VSMPO Avisma is a key supplier of aviation titanium to aircraft manufacturing giants such as Airbus. And Russia's Norilsk Nickel is the world's biggest producer of refined nickel. Market experts are well aware of the risks should Russia choose to restrict access to its precious metals.
Here and now, an embargo will mean a decrease in export and therefore a decrease in federal budget. It will also put in question the existence of these industries, especially titanium. So far, there is nothing to replace the Western markets with, but there could be other types of sanctions. Perhaps it will be some kind of a deal like with gas. The Europeans have gas trading system through ruble settlements.
That means Gazprom Bank always has foreign currency and is not under full-fledged sanctions. There could also be cooperation within the BRICS group of emerging economies on joint trade on the global market. Options are on the table and Russia is weighing the pros and cons of such a move. Moscow says the West's sanctions against Russia are nothing short of total economic warfare, and therefore strong retaliatory measures cannot be ruled out. But at the same time, there is an acknowledgement that such actions could cement divisions further in an already fractured world. Dasha Cherneshova, TRT World, Moscow.
Let's get more on this now with Greg Simons, an independent researcher on politics and geopolitics, which includes EU and NATO. Thanks for joining us, Greg. Now, Russia is a key supplier of uranium, titanium and nickel. What kind of ramifications could the proposed restrictions on these precious metals be on global raw materials markets, particularly for Western nations?
Well, as you say, it's mainly aimed towards the global north. So that's the Western-centric states, which are part of the US system of power. Now, it would have huge ramifications for them because, I mean, these materials are needed for military, aviation, space. A lot of very strategic industries would be hobbled. And, I mean, the Russians know that it's very difficult to source these materials elsewhere. So it will create a lot of problems to begin with, not in terms of demand, but in terms of supply.
Right, and how could this potentially backfire on Russia's own economy if it moves forward with the ban?
Well, I think the Russians are pretty realistic. I mean, they've got a very pragmatic view on the world, and they understand that there will be some backlash, some effect, because when you wage economic warfare, it's not a unilateral effect. I mean, whenever the US or other countries have done it, there is the effect because you interrupt the supply chains and so forth. So it was like when the US sanctioned Cuba after the revolution. The price of tobacco and sugar in the United States went up. I do suspect that this because the Russians have announced it in advance, could be part of their strategy for negotiating some settlement with the West.
Could the BRICS cooperation offer Russia alternative trade avenues for its metals and minerals, or will the lack of Western markets have a more significant impact on its industries?
Well, of course, there are some significant and growing industrial powers in the global south. I mean, I don't think it will quite make up the loss, at least in the short term, of Western markets. But this is not purely about economics. I mean, you have geoeconomics supporting a geopolitical strategy. And so this is the crux of it. The financial pluses and minuses will be considered, but this is going towards the goal of forcing the West either into negotiations or to back down on some of their economic warfare aspects.
Okay, Greg Simons, we will have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your analysis.
Thank you.
Drought clearly impacts farmers and their crops, but in Ecuador it has also disrupted something just as crucial: electricity. With reservoirs drying up, the country's hydroelectric plants are facing a generation crisis, leading to nationwide power cuts. Omar Bakalolo has the story.
Imagine living in a place where the sun goes down and the entire city falls into darkness. This is now a reality in Ecuador, where a severe drought has crippled electricity generation. Hydroelectric plants, which generate more than two-thirds of Ecuador's electricity, are operating at reduced capacity as reservoirs dry up. The Mazar Dam, a critical power source, is almost 4 meters below its operational level, prompting the government to impose additional power cuts that last up to 14 hours a day.
We have an energy system which is in a generation, transmission and distribution crisis. The strategic task is to maintain the reservoir of Mazar, to have control over the national energy system, to be able to have control over the cuts, the hours of the cuts that are needed to maintain that level in the reservoir.
The impact on Ecuador's economy has been swift and severe, with businesses, factories, and households all feeling the strain.
It affects a lot because of the damage it caused to the bikes. Secondly, since there is no light, everything remains dark. So people come in and can't see my products. I can't turn on my computer. I can't charge my compressor for maintenance.
Public sector workers were ordered to work from home for 2 days, an additional bit to reduce energy demand. But for citizens, the concern extends beyond the inconvenience of no electricity. It's about safety. Many neighborhoods now rely on military patrols to maintain peace during these power cuts.
We are trying to go back home as soon as possible because the children are also alone there. We have to try to get there quickly. We are trying to go back home and try to secure the doors because most of us are quite scared at night because everything will be in complete darkness.
Ecuador is no stranger to electricity problems. The country has faced an ongoing energy crisis since last year, as it battles its worst drought in more than 6 decades. President Daniel Noboa declared a state of emergency in April and made sweeping changes to the electricity sector, even calling for the resignation of the country's energy minister. To fill the electricity gap, the government also signed a deal with a Turkish company, Car Power Ship, to rent a power generation barge. The vessel, called Emre Bey, started supplying 100 megawatts of electricity last week, accounting for roughly 10% of the energy deficit. With power cuts becoming a part of daily life, Ecuadorians now hope to see a light at the end of the dark tunnel. Ömer Bakalolu, TRT World.
Well, that's all your business news for now. Thanks for watching.